Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is John David, and I'm the host of the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. And today, we're actually going to be interviewing one of you. Al Bellamy is a longtime listener of the podcast, and a while ago, we actually connected on LinkedIn, and I've seen his LinkedIn posts come up over and over again. So much so that I decided to reach out to him and actually bring him on the podcast and let's discuss what his strategy for growing his LinkedIn presence has been. So, what really caught my eye about Al is that he is just killing it in his personal brand on LinkedIn. So, I'm seeing post after post, and bear in mind, he is working full time as an executive officer for the Marines. So, he is actually building some momentum for when he actually wants to transition out of military life into the analytics space. So what we're going to talk about in this interview is going to cater around how Al is building a plan to launch his analytics career. The conversation is going to touch on how he's learning skills, how he's building his personal LinkedIn brand, and also the online communities that he's joined to help launch his career. If at any point you find some value out of this podcast and want to give back, the best thing you can do is leave a like, a comment, or even share this video. This will help boost our signal out on the algorithm so that we can get our voice and our message out to more people. If you're listening to this as a podcast episode, you can leave a review for the How to Get an Analytics channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell as we post new content each and every week. When you ring the bell, you get an email notification when we post new content. So, without further ado, let's jump into the interview. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. So, I'm going to be interviewing someone who is a longtime follower, right, Al? You've been watching this podcast for how long now?
It's been a few months, definitely since I started thinking about retiring. So.
Awesome. So to give you a little bit of details about Al, so he's currently, you're still in the military now, right?
Yes, I am.
And you're trying to make a transition from the military into an analytics job. And I'm impressed with how active you are in building your personal brand, because I keep seeing you showing up over and over again on LinkedIn. So we're definitely going to be digging into that. But before we get into kind of the LinkedIn presence and your strategy there, why don't you tell us a little bit about your strategy of how are you learning analytics right now?
So I have a pretty good grounding. So my bachelor's eons ago was in economics. So that was about 15 years ago now. So I remember in undergrad taking operations management, ops research classes as electives, and just sort of being fascinated by the analytic process. But at the time, I think I was briefly at Ohio U before I realized that was a mistake and joined the Marine Corps. But at the time, I was just fascinated by analytics and how you kind of looked for efficiencies and used calculus and things of that nature to optimize. But at the time at Ohio U, there was no major in that. It was just you could take a couple of classes as electives on your way to a BA degree or what have you. And so fast forward years later, after being enlisted in the Marine Corps for a while, and I'm going to Maryland, and it wound up the kind of quickest way to a bachelor's degree was economics. And so econ obviously had a lot of those sort of elements in it. I don't remember if they had the option for an analytics degree there at the time. Not sure I would have been inclined to do it. It was just the kind of shortest path to becoming an officer was to major in econ. But I remember game theory and all of those things, that the analytics stuff being in there, and those were the things that excited me the most. And then later on, a few years ago, I got the opportunity to go to Naval Postgraduate School, and the program that interested me the most was one called Systems Analysis. And so it's a lot of analytics, it's a lot of statistics, which are all things that I enjoy. The soft skill part of it a lot was very military oriented. So I remember having a very challenging analytics class that was all about Minesweeper search patterns and how to use unmanned undersea vehicles to enforce a naval blockade and
Wow,
things like that. So
that's fascinating.
super interesting analytics stuff that has practically no application in the civilian sector, but it's just good for working the sort of analytics brain muscles. Then we had a lot of classes on defense acquisitions and the budgeting cycle and things that if you're not planning to be long term in the military industrial complex, not super applicable. So interesting, good education, not probably going to be useful to me in the future. And so I'm currently on a utilization tour, a payback tour through the Marine Corps, and recently made the decision that at the end of that, the 2 years that I owe the Marine Corps, I'll be moving on to the civilian sector. So yeah, I'm pursuing a few avenues to learn analytics. Right now, I'm mostly studying SQL. And so I'm using, I decided that I played around with a few different venues and decided I really liked Data Camp. And so just the combination of the videos, the instructors, the sort of, it almost feels like you're learning without hardcore learning. It's just sort of kind of taking you by the hand. And then at the end of the chapter, you're like, oh, I do understand how to do that. That didn't feel like work. And so it's just, it's very interesting. I am combining it with some kind of hard book reading. But yeah, Data Camp is what I'm using right now. So I have a mentor that's sort of giving me steps along the way. He recommended I start with SQL because I knew nothing about it.
Ooh, can I pause you there? How did you find this
absolutely.
mentor?
So there are a ton of programs right now for veterans transitioning out, and almost to the point where the main difficulty is deciding what not to do.
Oh, wow.
There's only so many hours in the day. But yeah, so this one's called American Corporate Partners, and they assign you kind of a long-term mentor, like up to a year out from your separation. And it's someone in your field that, looks at your resume, looks at where you stand, what kind of job you want, and then says, you need to study this, 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 and this. You need to be connected with these people. You need to pursue these kind of internships. So it's, yeah, really, there's almost no way you can screw it up. And if you get with a mentor that you kind of don't work well with, you have the option of saying, yeah, I'll find me someone else. So luckily, I got a great guy that works at, I won't name the company, but he's working in the finance sector.
Oh, awesome.
And so he's kind of guiding me towards that. I'm not sure which industry I want to focus on yet. So I know that talking to you and Elizabeth Illig, you guys were focusing on I have some supply chain and logistics experience.
Right. Well, we're saying that's probably the lowest hanging juicy fruit for you.
Yeah.
Because you've got so many transferable skills in that space.
And that's, I still have a mindset for that, I think. So yeah, I could absolutely exist in that space and be happy with that.
Right. I mean, that could be your first job, transitioning to, it's so interesting the terminology you use. So you call it the private sector, right?
Yes.
So that could be your first transition job. And then kind of once you get your bearings for, civilian life and what it's like working in the analytics space, then you can kind of get your next opportunity as long as you're kind of continuing chugging along, doing what you're doing. Because I know you're doing the 66 days of data challenge with Ken G, right?
Yes. So I haven't been good about documenting that. So I know there are a couple different avenues to document that. I've sort of just been tagging anything that I post on LinkedIn that has anything to do with data. I slap the hashtag on there. So I think my main focus has been trying to figure out a name for Ken's podcast and annoying him by correcting his spelling. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because I did an interview on his channel and he misspelled analytics, right? That's hilarious.
So I probably should have just private messaged him that instead of posting it in an open forum.
No, so in the comment section on that interview, someone said, "Oh, I didn't know Jack Black was getting into analytics." So I mean, we're public figures now, so we get
wrong. There are worse people to look like than Jack Black.
Right, we get called out. We're used to it. So what has been? I'm not actually involved with the 66 days of data. I almost feel guilty because I'm so busy right now. I haven't done a great job of upskilling myself. I've been focusing more on just kind of maintaining the massive workload I
You're
have.
in the production phase.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So the 66 days of data, he's Ken was saying there's some theory that if you repeat an action for 66 days, it becomes like a irrevocable habit.
Mhm.
I don't know where that comes from, but yeah, you just kind of threw that challenge out to everyone in the data community that follows him. It's like, hey, if you're looking to get into data or upskill or become an analyst or a scientist or what have you, um, do I think he challenged everyone to a minimum of 5 minutes a day of data stuff, and to post it and kind of hashtag it and follow that challenge. But so I definitely have done that. I have a 35-minute commute one way, so I've become a big fan of podcasts, including yours, including Ken's, soon to come. But sometimes I'll put his YouTube videos and just put the phone face down on the seat so I don't get a ticket. It still works if you're just listening to it. So
Yeah, that's true. That's fantastic. It sounds like you're just kind of exposing yourself. I'm realizing the value of that because I'm teaching undergrads who are seniors at Greensboro College, and this is their first exposure to analytics. And I wanted to just
okay,
jump right in. And I think that there needs to be kind of like a warm up phase and just hear the concepts and let them kind of absorb that first before we go into, all right, so here's the KPI, here's the plan, and that
yeah.
this is a visualization we're going to execute. This is the return on investment. They're
So
like,
maybe they need to start with
whoa.
the 5 minutes a day and kind of ramp up from there.
Well, I mean, we're in a semester, so they don't have, I guess, that. If they only spent 5 minutes a day on my class, they would
That would
fail.
probably be bad. Yeah.
Right. But no,
I had some
I
classes I spent 5 minutes a day on, and it didn't end well.
yeah, that's true. So it's just a different learning path, but it's really fascinating from my perspective to see kind of the educational landscape and how it's shifting. Because I think that traditional education is having a major threat, and this major threats come from COVID. And what we're realizing is that we can do this online remote learning. I would say one of the major benefits of in-person, like a university or college degree, is that you have a group of people that you meet with, multiple times a week. So there's that sense of community. And what I love about what Ken's doing, and he's executing fantastically on this, is he's built a community around this 66 days of data. Because if you don't share, you feel pressure to share because you want to be part of that, and that there's kind of an accountability piece to that. That every day I need to post, and then posting, like kind of the secondary benefit is that you're building your personal brand. People are adding you on
Yeah,
LinkedIn, they're
absolutely.
seeing your content. I mean, I saw your LinkedIn post of your graph of how many people who've seen your profile was like flat, 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 bam. It went up like 3 or 4 times within a week,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. A lot of those were. I've been doing a series of USO seminars. They're taught by. There's a retired Army Sergeant Major named Mike Quinn that he's now a consultant for Ernst and Young, but in his kind of free time, if he has such a thing, he does seminars for the USO on how to master LinkedIn and build your personal brand. There's a whole series of them. He offers them at different times so that the people stationed in Europe or Africa or the Pacific can see them at their prime time. But he breaks down kind of basics of the algorithm, um, how to engage, how to kind of get people interested, how to get the most views, and how to beef up your profile. I just started going to those a few months ago, and it's interesting. The first time I went through these seminars, I was just frantically taking notes, just pages upon pages of new things that I was learning, and then started applying them. And then so he does a cycle of 3. There's one just on kind of LinkedIn basics and your profile. There's one on building your network, and there's one on engaging with content. So I've been through the whole cycle twice now. And the second time around, mostly what I did was just engage with people that were new to the seminars and just talking to them and answering questions based on what little I had learned in the months that I've been doing it. And it was just amazing. That's when the engagement just went off the charts. Just started connecting with all of those people. And it was amazing. In the span of like a couple of months, I started giving people advice. First, they started asking me for advice, and then I started looking for little things, just like, hey, you don't have any skills listed. Just put some skills on there so people can recommend you. Or, you know, your about section still says experience blah 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 with a demonstrated history of, you know, you've got the auto-generated about section. You should rewrite that so, you know, it's like you're engaged in doing something.
Cool. All right. So do you have like 3 points, or like what are the highlights? What have you, because you said you've gone through this program twice now, or the seminar twice. What are the highlights? Yes. Give me the highlight reel.
Highlights. See if I try and boil it down. He has these kind of go-to jokes, which deal with things that you would never think of. I mean, anybody going into LinkedIn, if you take the basic LinkedIn learning classes on how to beef up your profile and how to become an all-star, the 5 steps of, you know, put your picture on there and put a banner on it and make a headline. You know, if you do those basics, you're going to start seeing people interested in you. So he has these go-to jokes where it's like your email. If you have a Yahoo email address, employers will know you're in your 50s. If you have an AOL address, they'll know you might be north of 60. So, you know, you should have a Gmail address, and then you're kind of in the cool kids club, and, you know, age discrimination is a real thing. So things like that is, you know, just frowning in your picture, or just having a kind of military sort of flat mouth, not going to smile profile picture, just deters people from wanting to engage with you. Yeah, just having the basic blue dots matrix auto-generated banner.
Oh yeah, I see that all the
show
time.
that you don't care about your profile, or, you know, aren't kind of trying to make yourself look presentable to employers or to connections.
It's interesting because I think you're doing better on LinkedIn. Well, okay, you are executing on your strategy better than I am. I've got 5 LinkedIn courses, so I don't know, I've had probably 60,000 people take my LinkedIn courses. So there's an option for them to go check out my profile. So I've got a huge bump from that. But what I'm noticing from you is that you're engaging more, and I'm actually learning secondhand from your experience. So you're going in and leaving comments, answering questions. You know, like I totally missed an opportunity to comment on, here's a silly name. Because what Ken did with that of like, I want you to name my podcast, is it's kind of, do you know the concept of an emotional bid?
I don't.
So it's kind of like, it's like something that you put out there in a conversation or in LinkedIn here. It's like a post where people can kind of latch onto it and engage with it, to where I typically just post things like, here's a video, do this. Not like, I could change that to, hey, so-and-so, you know, Al said that, you know, the military, transitioning from the military to civilian life is tough. Do you agree? So that is an emotional bid versus, hey, check out this video. And you're kind of asking them to come in and engage. And the way that these social media platforms work, to my understanding, is that the more engagement you get, the more of a boost you get. You boost that signal, then that increases your chances of someone who might hire you. So is that kind of like getting back to game theory, is that the game that you're playing right now with LinkedIn? Yeah,
a little bit. So I haven't gone for the blatant emotional bid in my posts. I'm still, and it's probably maybe what I need to start doing. I'm still just kind of, here's me putting stuff out there every day. Talk about it if you like. I do what you're talking about on other people's posts. I go on their comment on something that they're saying, and then sort of leave it kind of diplomatic and open-ended. It's not Twitter. I'm not there to debate anybody or get in these arguments. It's just, hey, have you thought about this? Had a former colleague that was, he's working in AI and robotics with the defense contracting company now. And he wrote an article that many kind of military-oriented articles about we need to be better at tech, or we need to incorporate AI or machine learning. They all just kind of wish away all the difficulties of military contracting and increasing tech, such as budget cycle and the difficulty of try not to go too many military terms here. Difficulty of amending training and personnel management to adapt to new technology. You have to redesign the program of instruction at basic schools. Anytime you get a new program of record in, you have to design your training from the ground up. And I see a lot of articles in the Marine Corps Gazette and War on the Rocks that sort of wish those things away. They just say, hey, we need to incorporate robotics into the military. We need to have drones. We need to have this. This colleague of mine actually addressed the difficulty in manning, training, and equipping. Didn't address the difficulty in budgeting. Maybe it's the other way around. He addressed the difficulty in budgeting, but not in manning, training, and equipping, which is something that I'm familiar with from my last duty station. So I went on there and just said, hey, really appreciate the fact that you're writing this article that's mildly critical of the military, but you acknowledge that paying for this stuff is difficult, and you understand that difficulty. The follow-on that I would say is also very difficult to train Marine soldiers, sailors, and airmen to use this equipment and to incorporate it into as a program of record and have kind of a cradle to grave program with new equipment. And he was appreciative of that, and it started a conversation between us. But I feel like I do that well on other people's content. I don't do it so well on my own yet. So still working on that.
Well, it sounds like that was valid criticism. He probably welcomed that because you are the subject matter expert on that specific topic. It gets a little dicey when you're like kind of throwing out an opinion that you really don't have any context or perspective on. So I would say what you're doing is you were adding to the conversation there. You're also nice about it. You started with, I really appreciate this. The amount of like scathing negative, well, mostly reviews on my Udemy courses is just like, I mean, well, what's hilarious is a lot of times it's in like broken English. So it's like, this is very primitive. And it's that one was the one that like, that upset me because this was early on when I was just starting out. That was probably like my first.
You're taking it to heart because you don't have a whole lot of attaboys to balance it out yet.
Well, what I've done is I've hired an intern who handles all that for me now. Because I mean, there's 32,000 people who've taken that Power BI Udemy course, and I'm getting some really mixed reviews. When it's scaled to that size, you can't serve everyone. Because I would say probably 80% of the reviews are, this is fantastic, short, excellent lectures. And at the same time, I'll have people who are like, I need more explanation. You left out context. You kind of can't win when it's at that size of the scale. But what I can say is someone who's received a huge amount of criticism is that it's fantastic. You did a great job of being nice, but then offering constructive criticism. It's not just an attack. It's like, oh, this is good, and you validated them, and then you said, well, here's another something else to consider. So great job on that.
It's easy in the kind of sea of things on LinkedIn and on the internet in general. You can self-deselect. I mean, that guy that hated your Udemy course probably paid $10 for it. And what's $10? If you're 2 lessons in and it's not working for you, oh well, you lost $10 and you just bail and go find another course.
Right. I hope. I hope
I think it's kind of cheap and unnecessary to be like berating somebody like your course was terrible, or your post on LinkedIn was really crap, or you don't understand this. Like just keep scrolling. Like
Yeah.
There's no need to be a jerk.
I don't know. What we've learned about this, I guess, humanity in the age of the internet is that there are some angry, angry individuals out there.
Yes. Yes,
And there are trolls, and they're everywhere.
And they want to tell you their opinion.
Right. Well, okay. So speaking of wasting time and energy and allocation, how do you balance building your LinkedIn brand with building skills? So that seems like, because are you working full time right now?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm the executive. I got a day off right now because we spent the last 2 weeks in the field. But yeah, I'm the executive officer for an artillery battalion. So we have 972 Marines, last count. And so yeah, it's tough to balance that because those Marines need leadership, and they need a full-time executive officer working for them. So you got to sneak the transition plan in kind of nights and weekends, and then that's a family too. So that getting
Right.
the me time and the next job planning time in between there can be a challenge. But yeah, so you're right. The balance between working on making connections and building the brand, and between developing the skills that I need, it's a balancing act. Sometimes I feel like there's some overlap because, like we talked about, I can go on and make a post about, hey, I learned this in SQL the other day, or just post some graphs. I have some ideas for. I'm thinking about starting a blog. Said every data nerd ever. So one of my other passions is reality TV, but specifically shows that have an element of strategy to them. So I
Mm.
love Survivor is
Mhm.
my absolute favorite. But it gets a bad rap, but also Big Brother, because
Interesting.
there's a ton of strategy involved,
Mhm.
and it's and just a lot of kind of stuff that I remember reading about in Freakonomics, where there's tanking involved, which relates to my passion for sports as well, and that kind of analytics. But
That sounds like a
there's a
YouTube
strategy of
channel. That sounds like a YouTube channel to
what's
me.
that?
Like that could totally be a YouTube
Yeah,
channel. I think a blog you would miss, because what you could do is you could pull clips from the show and then talk about it from, like, as an executive officer in the military, these are my
yeah,
troops, and this is the strategy they deployed, and you could totally set that up. That could be a really interesting show. I mean, I
would
think
be.
you've got a unique perspective on it. I mean, and it's you've got the strategy, and I think you are passionate about data and using data to drive a strategy. So that
Yeah,
could potentially have legs for you. Although, I mean, you've got kids, you got a full-time job, you're
yeah.
transitioning careers, so that may get put on the back burner. But I support that decision
Well,
if you decide to go forward.
yeah. Um, but it would, like I was saying before, it would have an overlap where, yes, this gets my name out there, but also forces me. I really want to go back and kind of review some of the statistical concepts that I learned in my master's degree, and before that in the bachelor's degree. But I want to kind of go through and say, okay, chapter 1 of the stats book, it's just basic probabilities, flipping coins and drawing cards out of the deck. What can we talk about on Survivor and strategies of winning and losing, kind of reality game shows that relates to this, and have a blog post on that, and then sort of go potentially into like visualization, and I don't know when the next season of Survivor is, but my kind of ultimate goal is to have some sort of dashboard that shows in real time every episode. It's like, all right, who's the lead dog to win now, and why, and what are my kind of analytic tweaks and metrics to say, Johnny's going to win at the end of the show, and Susie's going to finish second,
No,
or
that's
something
fun.
like that. So
Yeah, well, you're having fun with it and you're learning.
yeah,
I think that's like, if you can combine those two things, that's where it's at. I don't know
yeah.
how long you can stay or how sustainable that is, but that's awesome. So let's close out the interview on this question.
Sure.
You mentioned that you're having kind of some unique challenges transitioning from military life to civilian life. You care to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it ranges kind of from the very mundane, kind of my pregnant pauses here where I start getting ready to say .mil-PF, which is this bizarro military acronym, and it's like, wait, nobody outside of kind of military senior enlisted field grade officer and above is going to know what the heck that means. So yeah, it's just changing your vernacular, just the language you use, the way you deal with people. A lot of the stress with Mike Quinn is just talking about nobody owes you anything from your military service. You are a veteran. Thank you very much for that. However, the fact that I was, am a major, was a major in the future, executive officer of an organization with 1,000 people does not mean you can now go be the chief operating officer for a for-profit company of 1,000 people, nor should you expect to be handed that opportunity on a silver platter. So it's a lot of kind of swallowing your pride, realizing that the things that you have built and earned over a military career, if that's 4 years or 30 years, you've no longer earned them. And just knowing that if you're going into the for-profit sector or even the not-for-profit, just companies are interested in you based on what you can do for them going forward, whether that's making money, whether that's raising money, whether that's cutting costs. In government, or whatever the agency is trying to accomplish there, they're interested in you going forward. They are at best mildly interested in what you've already accomplished in the military. But in the military, really, we're not here to train people for the civilian sector. And I tell this to Marines all the time. I'm now in a position to have to take my own medicine and realize it applies to me. But it's a painful reality. We train people for war, which is by and large, not a skill set that's called upon outside of the military. And the specific skill sets that we train to, I'm an artillery officer. There's no civilian artillery. So I'm looking back at where did I analyze? Where did I work on supply chain and logistics? Where did I do things that can actually make somebody money in the civilian sector, and highlighting those? Whereas in military life, it's like I earned a meritorious service medal. I have this award and that award. I have a great physical fitness score that nobody in the civilian sector cares about.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're going about it the right way, because the key term here, which I totally am stealing this from Elizabeth, is transferable skills. So you've already identified what skills you've developed over the years and then how they can apply within this new setting. So, it sounds like that's some excellent advice, by the way. It sounds like you've been giving this advice for years now.
I was definitely given this advice by you and Elizabeth, so that was very helpful. But, yeah.
Thanks.
You guys highlighted the skill sets that I had that are transferable, and moved on from there. So.
Okay.
I should tell her I still have not quite fixed my resume the way she showed me to. So,
well,
hopefully by the time this podcast is out there, I'll have that done.
Well, you got time, so you're not looking to land a job like next week, right?
No, it's going to be next October is the planned date. So that's when I got a 2-year education. Marine Corps requires, because it was distance, I did it online. Marine Corps requires 2 years payback afterwards. So that's up next October, and that's the plan, is to hit the job market.
So you're hitting this early. You're already like, because the more that you kind of engage with these communities and LinkedIn and the 66 days of data and listening to these podcasts, you're going to pick up that vernacular. Because I do think that is a major challenge of I can't speak. I literally had this conversation with my students yesterday where what I'm starting to do now is after we do a project, I have one of them sit down and I call it the hot seat and pretend that we're in a mock interview and explain the project to me as the interviewer.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, and one of the students who came up was like, I don't feel like I confidently explain myself. And the other thing he said was like, yeah, I'm worried that I don't know the vernacular of the people I'm going to be interviewing with, because he actually wants to get into doing some type of analytics work for government contracts. So he worked with that, I guess, in his last internship. And I think he's got some relationships in that space. So I don't know if that overlaps with what you're doing. I mean, I guess government agencies and stuff, but.
Yeah. There's a lot of commonality just within government agencies and how we do business. But
Awesome.
yeah, it sounds like you're really arming them with some tools to go out and compete really well, far and above what I did in school. So bravo for that.
Well, I like making them uncomfortable whenever possible.
Oh yeah, got you.
Get them up in the seat in front of everyone, and then we're all going to fixate on every word they say.
Yeah.
So it just gets them, up in front and more comfortable talking. Because that's something I've noticed about myself is that, this is interview, I guess, probably 45 or 46. Mm-hmm. I'm so much more comfortable in Carum, to where like the first 10 or 15 episodes, I kept saying, I had this nervous tick where after you would stop talking, I would say, oh, that's interesting. Every single time. I don't know if you noticed that about the early podcast episodes.
I didn't until you just said it. Thinking back, I'm like, yeah, he did say that a lot.
Oh, that's interesting. So now what I do is I just pause, absorb it, and then talk. I think I was afraid of the pauses of like, oh no, the audience is going to get bored if I take a breath. So just repetition and doing it over and over again. Well, Al,
it's a difficulty of, I know you've had some that were like in person, especially like when you're talking to Elizabeth, you guys are in the same room, and that's just kind of very organic, very fluid. And I know you guys rehearse what you're going to talk about, but yeah, it's a difference. There's a lot more kind of awkward silences on a Zoom call than there is if you just have that proximity, that face-to-face interaction. True. It's just more organic.
Yeah. Well, Al, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been phenomenal. So for those of you guys who are listening, how can they find you? I guess just you can see his name on the Zoom call right here. Just search that name on LinkedIn and add him, and let's blow up his LinkedIn presence even more.
Yep, the LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/Bellamy-Al.
Awesome.
Just another tip that Mike Quinn gave is don't have these hieroglyphics, numbers, and letters. On your LinkedIn tag, change it to your name or some variation thereof.
Thank you.
Yep.